Welcome. As you can see, today we're going to talk about the workshop production-ready domain-driven design. And as you can see, I'm using Miro. I'm using Miro for everything nowadays. And that's why the workshop itself will also be in Miro. And what we're going to do during the production-ready TDD, and what a lot of people in domain-driven design nowadays do, is event storming. So it doesn't matter if you're not familiar with it. We're actually going to introduce you to it during the workshop. But for the ones who ever did a event storming before, this might be a result of an event storm, of a software design event storm that we're also going to dive into. You already see a reservation system popping up, so it's about a cinema domain. But what we usually see, and this refers to why the name is called production-ready TDD, is usually when people did get introduced to collaborative modeling like event storming, and what we're going to do is example modeling as well. They say, okay, but how does this actually impact my code? How does it end up on our backlog? And how do we design a ubiquitous language from it? Hope you can relate to it. And yeah, how does this guide our software design, as domain-driven design says, right? Understanding your domain problem space, which can then guide your design. And how do I actually go to that proper bounded context? So these are all the questions that I got from other trainings I gave about domain-driven design, where we didn't code. And that's why we created this workshop. And this workshop teaches you how to collaboratively explore domain models and using domain-driven design techniques and implement them in production-ready software systems. And what we mean with that is we're not going to use any cloud technology or anything, but we're making sure that in Java and in C#, you end up with a deployable application. And what that means is we're going to go from scenario to modeling to code prop. And this is the model exploration whirlpool by Eric Evans. He wrote it after the book about how do I actually challenge models with new scenarios or model domains. This is how his version is. And in the DDD crew on GitHub, you can see this image going. And we're going to actually go through all these scenarios. Now, is this workshop right for you? As I said, we're going to dive into code with Java and C#. So if you're a software developer or a software architect that can still code, because half of the workshop will be coding, then this is for you. And we're going to do it in an object-oriented programming language, as in this case, Java and C#. So if you have experience with it, 3 to 5 years of experience programming in an OOA, then this workshop would be for you. Now, who are we? Well, as you can see, my name is Kenny Baas Stegle. I'm an independent consultant, and I'm doing social technical system design. And actually, that collaborative modeling with event storming to model it all together. And well, for who of you haven't heard, I'm writing a book on collaborative software design with Aardling and Gien. And I also organize virtual TDD. Bruno's not with me, so together with Bruno of 42 Skills, we created this workshop to actually go from modeling to code. And he has been a product and technical coach for many years, and he coaches teams doing TDD, BDD, and DDD. And that's the same what I do now currently in my current customer, with the team pairing up, but also modeling the domain, everything that we got to discuss in this workshop. He also organizes BDD Paris meetup. So about the workshop itself, it is cut into 5 modules, so 5 half days. The first one is an introduction and a brief tour about domain-driven design. And we're going to do that process event storming you saw on the first slide. And then we're going to introduce you to the bounded context pattern. And we cut it up in modules, but it can be that in the end of module 1, we might not get into that part, and we start with module 2. So module 2 will dive into the model part of it. Then we go to module 3, where we actually go into code, module 4 as well, and in module 5, ending up with a working code that you can deploy essentially to production without the infrastructure part. So let's go over it very briefly. So day 1, In the 2 weeks, we start in at 2 o'clock CET. We do the introduction. As you can see down, we're going to do a brief tour about what's domain-driven design exactly, because we want to get each and every one on one language. Well, it's domain-driven design, right? So we want to have a ubiquitous language. So we started that. We're going to do, as you can see on the right side, some examples from the last time we did this. We're going to do breakout groups on Miro. You don't need an account for Miro, but we'll invite you. We have the Miro board for you, and we're going to do some event storming. You'll get access to it a week before, and then you can already start learning yourself and get accustomed to Miro if you have never done it. It's quite simple from the start, so not knowledge is needed from Miro, but either way to online a model, and Miro is for me one of the de facto standards. And then we're going to do an introduction about the bounded context pattern, and we're going to map out some early bounded context in day one. So then the next day we start at the same time, and here we're going to go a bit deeper. We're actually going to software design, and we're going to do a short event storming as well, but very short, very brief dive into an example, and then straight on go to example mapping, and eventually start working on an object-oriented model for our domain with responsibility-driven design based on the CRC codes. So that's day 2, a lot of modeling again. And then on day 3, we finally start the modules. And day 3, we're going to start with a very quick coding lab and implementing that bounded context that we designed together using outside-in TDD. Very focused on outside TDD, how you would do it on a bounded context. And then the second lab, we're going to dive into a bug. So every coding lab you can do for yourself. You can also do within a group. And that's all up to you, right? If you're the person that just writes software alone, it's fine. You can get a breakout, or you can stay in the main room. If you want to do that together with others, that's also fine. Pair up. Everything goes there. And then so coding lab 1 is really to get you accustomed with the domain model. Then in coding lab 2, and you get a Git repo, by the way, because we made branches for each of the labs. You can start again from that outside-in TDD again and make that potential of the model clear. So we're going more into a bug, going through the technical patterns of DDD and why these technical patterns create that supple design. What we mean supple, it can follow the domain model along as it evolves. And that's why we focus on the technical DDD patterns. Then for day 4, we're going to dive into module 4, which is a deeper model, and it takes a bit longer. Here we're going into something called a deep model, which means diving in and moving away from the naive part. So a naive domain model, what Eric Evans calls a naive domain model, is the first domain model you make. The nouns are very simplistic. You can relate to them, but the deeper model actually focuses on the underlying questions or problems the model will solve for you. And these can be done in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2, both focusing on slightly different aspects. If you don't finish the labs on the day itself, it doesn't matter, because you can do them by yourself in another time as well. So the examples are on GitHub. All the branches are available for you to also dive into with all the examples. So later on, you can read it. So the specific coding examples are not about the best code. It's about how would you do this, how would you structure the code. And it's workable code. It works with unit tests, but it's not about the language. So Java, C#, right? Not about getting all the new lambdas in Java, maybe, which are there since Java 8. You don't need all that knowledge of Java and C# because it stays really basic, but it's about how do we structure it? How can we use the design patterns that DDD talks about in the technical patterns? And then on day 5, we're going to do the ports and adapters, or also known as hexagonal architecture, to protect that bounded context from and that domain model in the bounded context from the infra side. So in that case, we're going to locally start the our code, and we're actually going to run REST installs to it. So here you can see the production ready part where you can say, well, from here I can make an, well, I can actually deploy this to, well, maybe a local machine or a cloud machine. We're not going to dive into that, but at least from here in Java, we use Spring Boot in Lab 4. Again, you don't need a lot of knowledge of Spring Boot. That's all set up for you. And in C#, it's all the basics that .NET has to offer for you and that you can start. For Java, we're using Maven, by the way, which is pretty standard, but everything should speak for itself. And that's module 5. Now, if you want more information about this workshop, then please go to TDD Europe. You can also contact me or Bruno on the available things, or go to the Academy Production Ready TDD. And that was the talk about the workshop. And now I'm gonna stop the recording.